the Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. The Pharisees went off and plotted how they might entrap Jesus in speech. They sent their disciples to him with Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are a truthful man, and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. And you are not concerned with anyone's opinion, for you do not regard a person's status. Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it lawful to pay the census tax to Caesar or not?" Knowing their malice, Jesus said, "Why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin that pays the census tax." Then they handed him the Roman coin. He said to them, "Whose image is this and whose inscription?" They replied, "Caesar's." At that he said to them, "Then repay to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord.
If there was ever any person that wanted to look for an excuse to oppose a government and its practices and look to Jesus, you would not get very far. And of course, I'm thinking about the phrase that we just read, render to Jesus, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God. They were trying to trap him, but he did not fall for the trap. Jesus is not an enemy of the government. Every legitimate government, whether you agree with that or not, has a responsibility. And Jesus is saying, you do your part. You are a citizen of a country and you do your part. If you don't want to pay taxes, and you go through the Bible and look for a verse, do not pay taxes, you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it. In the first reading, a king who's not even Jewish is the person that liberates the Israeli people from the exile. So even kings and governments who are not necessarily followers of our tradition, of our Christian or Jewish tradition, are seen as means to achieve something, to achieve a good. In this case, a king who is a pagan is chosen to liberate Israel from the exile. So it's very clear that Jesus is very opposed to being used as something to destroy a government or a system. But what is usually we talk a lot about governments because of Caesar's. In that coin, we have the image of Caesar. And they expected to say, oh no, don't pay him. You know, that is an evil man. Look how he has treated our people. But what is really catches my attention to me, what catches my attention is when he says, render to God what is God's. And I always have a problem with that, because I have to think, what belongs to God? What belongs to God? But it's not too much of a problem, because the answer is already given. In the first book of Genesis, when God created man, the Bible tells us that he created him in his image. So that means that each one of us here in this church and throughout the world was created in the image of God. We have the image of God. And with that image, we must also pay God his due. What does that mean? Well, we know that God is merciful. And my image of God must portray mercy. I must be merciful. We know that God is forgiving and compassionate. My image of God must also portray forgiveness, being compassionate, not ignoring those who need our help, those who need our forgiveness. In our image of God, God is a loving God. Therefore, we must portray love. Yes, to those that are close, but also to those that are not part of our circle. Not necessarily only those who are close or we consider neighbors. So that gives us a great responsibility. Come April, we know that we got to pay our taxes. There's no getting away around it. You know, we got to pay our taxes. And when we are called to judgment, we must also pay our taxes. What kind of image did you portray of me? God will say. Were you merciful? Were you compassionate? Were you a loving person? Were you a faithful person? And beyond being a very heavy responsibility, it's also a very liberating understanding. A very liberating thing to know that I am an image of God. And if we have a heart of stone, that only means that we must change. If we are able to realize that my point of view is so hard, so unchangeable, we must think of God, because God had to change his mind many times. Many times he wanted to punish us, and yet he said, no, I will wait. I will give them time. I will show them mercy. And that is what we must do. I just came back from a wedding just 2 hours ago. And I love weddings because when two couples get married, the celebrant always says, you are the unity between you two is the image of God's unity, of God's love for His church. And there it is. We live it. We live that image of faithfulness when those of us who are married and those of us who have been married for a long time and are still faithful, we're doing what God wants of us. And of course, that's not the only sign of faithfulness. There are many kinds of faithfulness. Certainly, the faithfulness that we have towards our church is another sign that we want to maintain that connection. We want to maintain that image. We don't want our God side to be obliterated, erased, forgotten. So to me, it's a wonderful message. Sometimes we have to take our time and say, and every day we, especially at night when we go to bed, ask ourselves, how did I portray? How did I show that our God is a good God? You know what happens to people who are identified as church people, devoted people, faithful Christians, faithful Catholics, and when we do something wrong, people are saying, oh, okay, is that what your faith is all about? Is that what I'm supposed to follow? And of course, we know the answer is no. People who know that we are faithful Catholics, faithful Christians, are watching. They're watching every step. They're hearing every word that we say. They're looking at our attitude and our actions. And sometimes they turn around going like this. We did not pass the test. So every night when we go to bed, we say, Lord, forgive me for the times that I was not a good image of you. Forgive me for the times that I was not a loving person. And help me. Help me tomorrow, because each day that we live is an opportunity to get closer to God, to be a closer image of God. That is what He calls us to today. May God bless you.